Hey, what is up YouTube? Kolst here with the second installment of the Murder Castle Nathria mini-set, Maw and Disorder. I believe the name is the second round of cards announced, but before we get into that again, we're going to talk a little bit more about this arena changes that seems to be getting teased right now. Just looking at Twitter right now, a couple of the people have asked, like, hey, is there going to be an arena rotation with patch 24.4 with the mini-set? And he says, Matt London, the leader of the modes team, if you don't know, said there will be arena news, but he didn't really directly answer the question. And then there's me having a conversation, and not important for right now. But then again, another question of, hey, is there going to be a rotation? We want to know if our decks are going to get retired or not. And he again says there's going to be a new season, doesn't say there's going to be a new rotation. It's very possible that, you know, if something like dual class or some other kind of event is happening, they might keep the sets the same. So it's not a rotation exactly, but it is going to be a completely new game experience. So we will have to see if something like that is coming. It does so happen, you know, they've been talking a while ago. This was during the whole the whole fiasco with runestones and stuff, but he talked about how they're not trying to monetize arena super hard, but they are trying to make a whole bunch of other improvements. Just so happens that they are doing an AMA today where they're going to be talking, possibly answering some questions. So I threw this question in there. We'll see if we get any answers or any more hints about what might be coming, but we will just have to wait and find out, I guess. But with that, let's just get right into these cards. So there have been, I believe, 10 cards revealed today. The first one being the legendary. Let's talk about that first. Is the Demon Hunter legendary. Prosecutor Meltranix. This is a 4-mana 2/6 demon. Battlecry, your opponent can only play their left and rightmost cards on their next turn. I'm assuming that, you know, you can keep playing the rightmost cards, so if you had like a 5-card hand, you could theoretically, you know, play the middle cards via playing the cards on the outside first. I believe that's how this works, but anyway, I mean, it's very obvious that this could be very disruptive. It's weird though, because it just sometimes won't be disruptive. If they top deck the play that they wanted anyway, as I've seen this joke multiple times already, because they always do that for me, then this card will do absolutely nothing. It's a 4-mana 2/6, which is not very good. But I think where the power of this card will be is when it's played on curve, because just on curve, that's when your opponent's most of the time going to have a pretty decent hand size, and if they just happen to not be able to play their 4 or 5 drop because it's in the middle of their hand, it could just completely ruin their turn. Later on, a lot of the times people have a lot of mana to play anything they want, so they could play from some of the outside cards, but also they might just not have that many cards, and if you only have 2 cards in hand, then this Battlecry does absolutely nothing. So overall, it's a little bit weird. I think as far as arena is concerned, which this review is about, I think it's honestly a little bit too situational, because again, on curve, I think it's going to be pretty good and pretty disruptive usually, but otherwise, like, I mean, a lot of times it's just not going to do anything, and the 4-mana 2/6 is pretty bad. So probably not a terrible card, but not really what you're looking for, especially in a legendary. Probably not a card you're going to be seeing a lot. So let's move on to the next classes. There were 3 classes revealed. I should have mentioned this earlier: Priest, Rogue, and Warlock. So the first one, Priest, let's go over. Theft Accusation, a 1-mana rare shadow spell. Choose a minion, destroy it after you play a card copied from the opponent. Okay, so this is interesting because Priest has Shower Death, which can kill pretty much anything that you would actually want to kill with this for only 1 more mana, and then you don't have this weird condition, right? It'll depend on rotation, obviously, how easy it is to actually get cards from the opponent. Obviously, this is always going to be in with Identity Theft because it's in the same set. And some cards, like the 1-mana 1/1 that copies from your opponent's deck, that one might rotate out, so then you won't have that one. That's the most common way to generate cards from your opponent right now. So obviously, it's going to completely depend on your deck, what you happen to have or what you expect to be able to have. Overall, though, I think even if you had a fairly good number of ways to copy cards from your opponent, if this was up against like Shower Death, for instance, you would just take Shower Death to cut the BS, basically, and just have a guaranteed ability to kill something rather than this. It might work. Because compared to even, you know, something like Snap Freeze, for example, in Mage, at least Snap Freeze does something if you aren't able to combo it, but this, if it doesn't combo, does literally nothing. Priest also has cards like, you know, the Light It Burns, for example. You just probably wouldn't want to take something this conditional, because Priest just has better ways to do exactly what this card's trying to do. And so the next card we have here on this list is Clear Conscience. Clear Conscience, a 3-mana common holy spell. Give a minion +2/+3, and only you can target this with spells and hero powers. 3 mana for a +2/+3 buff. That's what the Lifesteal spell used to be, and you know, that card was okay, but not very good, frankly, even because the lifesteal wasn't that important, and it's just not the most efficient buff. However, Priest does have this problem that if you try to put too many buffs on a single minion, well, that minion becomes super vulnerable to silence or removals, for example. And this at least tries to mitigate this a bit, right? If you use maybe a different buff to make a minion really big, you can do this to make it even bigger, and then at least some of those things like the spells cannot be used to target and kill it. Now there are still going to be other ways that you can kill it, potentially non-targeted removals, minion battle cries, for example. So it'll be one of those cards I think that'll have its moments, but overall it's just going to be kind of okay. Usually it's just going to be a buff, and any buff that gives both attack and health in Priest is pretty good, but probably not something to go crazy over. With that, the last card given to Priest right here is a 4-mana minion called Incriminating Psychic. 4-mana 2/6 Dragon Taunt. Death Rattle, copy a random card from your opponent's hand. So a 4-mana 2/6 Taunt is a somewhat playable card, not one you're happy to have, but okay. Then on top of that, it gets a dragon tag, which is very nice. Priest just generally has ways to take advantage of dragon synergy, but also copy a random card from your opponent's hand. So essentially draw a card as well, and copying from your opponent that has some synergies, and as well you might be able to just get their big win condition by chance and get yourself into a game that you actually might have had no business winning. Always a nice upside. So overall, it's one of these things where it's not like blatantly overwhelmingly powerful. It's, unless you steal something that will win you the game, not going to win you the game by itself, but it does more than a card should. So this is a very good card, and it's a common, so you're going to be picking this a lot. You're going to be seeing this a lot. It's going to be a big staple in Priest anytime Castle Nathria is in. And with that, let's move on to the next class, which we will talk about Rogue. So Rogue has 3 cards revealed again. Actually, this one was already revealed, so I'll just go over quickly. It's Murder Accusation. 2 mana, choose a minion, destroy it after an enemy minion dies. Compared to the Priest one, this one's a much easier condition to trigger because it just requires your opponent to play another minion, and then you have to be able to kill it. And it's still 2 mana Assassinate if you can trigger it, so that makes it very good. So pretty good card, I think. Next one we have is Perjury, 2 mana secret. When your turn starts, discover and cast a secret from another class. The second time they have had a secret that your opponent isn't actually able to trigger, that automatically triggers on the beginning of your turn, given a condition, which is the fact that your hero hasn't blown up yet in this case. I've seen the joke already that rogue secrets are so bad that even rogue secrets don't want to play rogue secrets, they want to play other secrets. Obviously, you can get either paladin, mage, or hunter secrets from this. If you get a hunter secret, it's okay. But if you get a mage secret, you actually do gain a mana. If you get forced to pick 3 different paladin secrets, then you just cry, I guess. Although sometimes those are okay. But the problem with this is that this is just a secret on a 1-turn delay. For the first turn, it will always do absolutely nothing except maybe confuse your opponent and make a misplay possibly. So that just seems not very good. There are some things you could possibly, take advantage of. You could, like, on the start of your turn, get a splitting image and then set it up. So there's, like, technically combos you could do. But overall, I just think a delayed secrets aren't that good, and getting a delayed secret is even less good, so I just don't think this card is very good. And with that, let's move on to the last card here, wherever it is not that one. Ah yes, it is this one, Scribbling Stenographer. Probably the wrong way to pronounce that, but whatever. 6 mana, 4/4 rush, that costs 1 less for each card you played this turn. So obviously in Construct, this is going to be like a 1 or a 0 mana 4/4 pretty easily, because rogues just tend to spit cards out of their hand like crazy. However, in Arena, you just don't tend to be able to do that. And this is expensive enough that it just doesn't seem very good. At 4 cost, it's things like okay, but it really needs to be like 3 cost to really be good, which requires you to play 3 cards, which generally just isn't going to happen. If you have coin, it becomes a lot more possible. If it was like on turn 6, turn 7, you have to coin and then play 2 other cards, for example, and then still have 3 mana to actually play this on that turn, right? It's a little bit difficult, so I just feel like this is a little too expensive to really consistently make use of Arena, so it's probably just not going to be very good. But anything that has Rush, even if you had to pay 4 or 5 mana for this, not completely unplayable, so you might have to take it if it's up against, pretty terrible options. But that is it for Rogue. The last class we have here is Warlock. The first one is Arson Accusation. 2 mana fire spell, common. Choose a minion, destroy it after your hero takes damage. So this is another one of those cards, again, in that theme of weird conditional assassinates, basically. This one probably the easiest because you can always trigger it, because you can trigger with life tap. Basically, this is just Brittle Bone Destroyer, which was an old card of 4 mana 3/3 with basically the same effect. That was assassinate with a stick, with a body. This is just assassinate minus the body. Also, I guess worth noting that it's after your hero takes damage. It doesn't say on your turn, so even if they hit you in the face, you'll kill their minion. So you might not even have to life tap sometimes. You could actually just play this. Although I figure most of the time you're gonna just tap or do something else to trigger it. But yeah, I mean, this is just, out of these so far, easily the best one because it's by far the easiest one to trigger, most consistent one to trigger, because you need absolutely no help at all from your deck or hand. Next card we have here, Imposter. 2 mana 1/1 demon. Battle cry, choose a friendly imp, transform into a copy of it. But obviously this is more of a constructed card, but there's enough good imps. I mean, if you copy a 3/3 imp, you know, like that infuse imp, it's already, you know, technically good, right? Although a delayed 2 mana 3/3 isn't that amazing. But there's other things you can copy, like the 6-drop imp or the jumbo imp, for example. There's a lot of good things you can potentially copy. So in some decks, this might be a good card, but it's just, you know, it's going to completely rely on whether or not you happen to have those cards. Probably not something you're going to want to draft just in case you happen to get it. You want to see if you have the combo pieces first, and then even then it might be a little iffy. And the last card revealed for Warlock here is Habeas Corpses. This is a 3 mana shadow spell. Discover a friendly minion to resurrect and give it rush. It dies at the end of turn. Oh, interesting. I just realized that I misread this the first time. I thought it was Death Rattle minion. It's actually just any minion. So that changes how I was thinking about it. It makes it a lot worse than I thought, because that means that if you have a bunch of like 1/1 imps, for example, die, then that could really ruin your Discover pool. Because the ideal situation is, and what I thought this was, is a Death Rattle, then if you get any Death Rattle off, basically, anything that's remotely decent, this array can be very good. So that's a pretty significant potential upside. However, a lot of the times you're just going to try to discover the minion with the highest possible attack, because you might not have a Death Rattle available or might not be offered to you, and then you just deal, you know, some amount of damage. Making it this thing where it's kind of like an RNG, like you're probably happy to just get like a Shadow Bolt a lot of times. Sometimes you'll get something much better with the Death Rattle or much more attack, but sometimes you might get something much worse. Overall, that makes it feel like something where it's going to depend kind of on what your deck looks like. This is more like a removal for a slower deck, and you want to really play this later on in the game, potentially maybe after you've had a Proto Drake or some other big Death Rattle go off, because it's not going to function in the early game like a Shadow Bolt would. You would much rather have a Shadow Bolt earlier on, but later on this could be potentially a better card. That makes it, especially with how I like to play Demon Hunt, or how I like to play Warlock, a lot more aggressively. Probably not a card I'm going to be looking to draft, but if you are playing this kind of control Warlock, probably a pretty good card. Not amazing, but decent. And something to always think about if you have the appropriate combo pieces. But with that, let's close that out there. Thanks a lot for hanging out in this video. If you like the video, like, subscribe, comment, all of these things. Thanks a lot for hanging out. We'll see you guys in the next one.